The morning began with an eerie silence over the vast plains surrounding Yellowstone National Park. The wind, which usually carried the scent of pine and damp earth, seemed to have retreated. The air was still, as if the very breath of the world had been suspended. Gradually, an orange glow began to form on the horizon, not from the rising sun, but from something emerging from the depths of the earth. The light didn't flicker like that of an ordinary fire. It pulsed, as if it had a heart of its own. It was at that moment that the first sound echoed, a deep, low roar, not from any animal's throat, but from beneath the ground, as if the entire planet were groaning. The trees trembled without any wind. The animals instinctively fled, as if escaping an invisible predator. Some tourists recorded the scene, others simply froze, unable to move a muscle. And then came the question that burned on the lips of all who witnessed it. Was this merely a quirk of nature, or a direct sign from God? The news would try to explain it as unusual geothermal activity, perhaps linked to Yellowstone's famous volcanic caldera. But for those familiar with the words of Jesus in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, it seemed like much more than geology. Jesus spoke of earthquakes in various places, signs in the heavens, and how men's hearts would fail them from fear of what was coming upon the world. And there, in the face of that phenomenon, terror and fascination intertwined. What was happening wasn't just another chapter in scientific observation logs. It was as if the ancient pages of prophecy were being turned before our eyes. The scientists monitoring the area were baffled. Sensors detected a sequence of microtremors so regular they seemed like drumbeats. Some geophysicists said they had never recorded anything like it in the region, not even during past seismic events. The colors of the thermal springs suddenly changed, taking on intense shades of red and gold, as if the earth were burning from within. Tourist videos showed steam rising not only from the usual fumaroles, but from new fissures that had suddenly opened in the ground. It was as if the earth had begun to breathe, and each breath carried a warning. Meanwhile, in nearby towns, residents reported low sounds, almost like distant trumpets, echoing the previous night. There were no military events or air maneuvers that could explain them. These sounds, some said, resembled the war cry described in the scriptures, before great judgments. Joel 2 speaks of a day when the sun will turn to darkness, the moon to blood, and signs will appear in the heavens and on earth: blood, fire, and columns of smoke. Those familiar with this text felt a chill seeing Yellowstone's steam columns rise, tinged by the orange glow that stained the clouds. But the phenomenon wasn't isolated. In recent weeks, small earthquakes had been recorded not only in the park, but in other parts of the United States, like California and Nevada. Strange underwater noises were captured by sensors in the Pacific, some resembling distant explosions. And curiously, a group of fishermen in Alaska reported seeing a strange light streaking across the sky, silent and swift, on the same night Yellowstone began to roar. These geographically separated events seemed to form a mosaic of signs that, together, pointed to something greater. It's impossible not to recall the words of Romans 8:22. We know that the whole creation has been groaning, as in the pains of childbirth, right up to the present time. What are these tremors, these changes in the color of the thermal waters, these inexplicable lights and sounds, if not the groans of creation? Not groans of death, but of birth, a prelude to something about to be born. The earth isn't just stirring without reason. It's responding to a divine clock that we often ignore. Social media filled with images. Some showed tourists with tears in their eyes, not from fear, but from an indescribable sense of standing before something sacred. Others laughed nervously, trying to downplay what they saw. There were also skeptics, insisting everything had a scientific explanation. But amid these voices, there were those who, with a grave tone, said, "Don't you see? The heavens are speaking. The trumpet has already sounded." The following dawn, the sky above Yellowstone was pierced by a blue flash so intense that it caused security cameras in towns miles away to automatically adjust their brightness. The flash lasted only a few seconds, but left a luminous trail that dissipated slowly. To some, it seemed like just an atmospheric phenomenon. To others, it recalled Ezekiel's vision of God's glory moving like lightning. Isaiah 24 describes a time when the earth will reel like a drunkard, it will sway like a hut, and its transgression will weigh heavily upon it. And in that moment, looking at the images, The descriptions seemed to take on flesh and bone before our eyes. As the days passed, the phenomenon didn't fully dissipate. The fumaroles continued to expel more steam than usual. The underground sound, though weaker, could still be detected by equipment. And reports of sounds resembling trumpets emerged from other parts of the world: Canada, Scotland, Chile. It was as if the call was spreading from continent to continent, from ear to ear. What does this mean for us? Are we merely witnessing a natural cycle of the earth, or the convergence of signs foretold in the Bible? Matthew 24 speaks of a time when the love of many will grow cold, and when the gospel will be preached in the whole world before the end. We live in an era where information can cross the planet in seconds. A sign in the sky above Yellowstone today could be on millions of phones tomorrow. And each person who sees it must decide, is it just nature or is it God calling? And here the question turns to you. Can you still hear God's voice amid the noise of the world? Or have you, like many, grown accustomed to ignoring the signs, hoping they'll fade on their own? What if this is just the beginning? What if what we saw in Yellowstone is the first note in a series of warnings that won't stop until the King returns? The sound from the earth is deep, but the sound from the heavens is even more urgent. Revelation 8 describes trumpets that announce judgments on the earth, the sea, and the rivers. If Yellowstone is merely a rehearsal, what will happen when the full orchestra of heaven plays? Will you be ready? The morning after the blue flash, Yellowstone awoke under a dense mantle of fog. It wasn't the soft mist of cold mornings, but a thick, almost metallic veil that seemed to weigh on every leaf, every stone, every breath. The air had a strange taste, as if filtered through fire and sulfur. Some tourists described the sensation of breathing inside a volcanic cave. The usual sounds of wildlife were absent. No bird song, no distant crack of branches under bison hooves. It was as if nature were holding its breath, waiting for something. Local guides, experienced in recognizing unusual animal behaviors, began noticing alarming patterns. Wolves that normally hunted in packs were scattering. Deer were migrating to unusual areas. Even insects seemed to avoid certain zones. And amid this, geologists reported a sudden increase in surface ground temperature in specific park areas, something they said couldn't be explained by climate variations alone. And it was exactly as the fog began to lift that it happened. A shrill sound, like the blast of a metal trumpet, echoed over the mountains. It wasn't a continuous sound, but 3 long notes, followed by a piercing silence. Tourists looked up, some covering their ears, others crying without understanding why. Cell phone cameras captured the scene. Clouds moved in a spiraling pattern, as if being pulled toward the center of an invisible vortex. Within minutes, dozens of people began sharing videos on social media. The news crossed borders in no time. In Canada, Iceland, and even Australia, users reported hearing similar sounds. It was as if a specific frequency had been unleashed across the Earth, something that disregarded time zones or distances. Some experts tried to link the sound to atmospheric phenomena, like the so-called skyquake, sonic booms caused by sudden changes in air pressure, but the pattern, repeated in different parts of the planet, defied simple explanations. It was as if the Earth were being tuned, string by string, for a cosmic concert about to begin. I recalled then what Zechariah 14 describes, a day when the Lord will set his feet on the Mount of Olives, and it will split in 2. If that text speaks of such a physical and literal intervention, it's not absurd to think that audible signs might precede it. Sounds that don't belong to any human instrument, and the signs kept piling up. 2 days later, in the night sky above Yellowstone, witnesses reported seeing 3 columns of light rising vertically, motionless, as if fixed in the firmament. They remained visible for nearly 15 minutes before dissipating. Some photos captured not only the light, but a kind of vibration around it, as if the air were trembling. In the Bible, columns of light and fire are marks of God's presence, as in Exodus 13, when the Lord guided Israel in the desert with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. But here, in the 21st century, amid high-definition cameras and live streams, these columns appeared over one of the most geologically unstable places on Earth. Coincidence or reminder? Scientists, though cautious, began admitting something unusual was happening. Seismic data showed regular pulses, as if the magma were moving in circular patterns. There were no immediate signs of an eruption, but the behavior was far from normal. One geophysicist said it was like hearing Yellowstone's heart beat faster. While the media debated, Christian communities worldwide began seeing the phenomenon as a call to repentance. Pastors preached on Matthew 25 and the wise and foolish virgins, warning that the bridegroom could come at any moment. Preaching videos mingled with images of the light columns, creating a mosaic of warning and hope. Yet it wasn't just Christians who sensed the gravity of the moment. Native American tribes in the region, whose traditions include prophecies about the spirit of the mountain awakening, began performing purification ceremonies. For them, Yellowstone is more than a park. It's a living being, a guardian. And the awakening of this guardian is never neutral. What stands out is that, alongside these signs, the entire world seemed to enter a period of convulsion. Moderate earthquakes struck countries almost simultaneously. Solar storms disrupted communication systems, and even marine animals like whales and dolphins were found stranded on distant shores for no apparent reason. It was as if the entire planet were emitting a silent scream. Romans 8 comes to mind again. The creation groans. But now, those groans seem louder, more urgent. Revelation 6 describes the four horsemen, each bringing a specific judgment. When the second horseman takes peace from the earth, it's not just in wars that we see this, but also in the unrest of nature. Yellowstone may not be a battlefield in the human sense, but it is undoubtedly a spiritual battlefield, where signs and warnings are cast before humanity. And yet, how many truly hear? How many realize that God may be using even the wildest and most uncontrollable elements of the earth to call his children back? Many look at the columns of light, the trumpet sounds, the pulsing earth, and think, this will pass. But what if it doesn't? What if it's just the beginning? The questions become more personal when night falls and silence returns. Are you ready to hear and obey, even if the whole world mocks you? Would you recognize God's voice if it echoed through the mountains? Or would you mistake it for just another natural phenomenon, waiting for some expert to provide a comforting explanation? The fact is, in this generation, we've never been closer to seeing ancient prophecies take shape before our eyes. The trumpets echoing over Yellowstone may not yet be the final judgment, but they are, without a doubt, a dress rehearsal. And every rehearsal is a chance to prepare. The question is, will you prepare? Because the heavens have already spoken, the earth has already trembled, the trumpet has already sounded, and you. The third dawn after the phenomena began brought something no one expected. Thermal cameras installed by researchers captured a heat pattern in the ground that, when viewed from above, formed an almost perfect circle with an incandescent core at the center. To some, it seemed like just a geological coincidence. To others, it looked like the eye of a watcher, a symbol that something or someone was observing. That same day, Yellowstone's sky was overtaken by clouds of a deep reddish hue, even without a sunset. Photos didn't do justice to the intensity of the color. Witnesses said it was as if the world were submerged in a goblet of ruby wine. The Bible, in the book of Joel, speaks of the moon turning to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. And though it wasn't the moon that was tinted, the feeling was the same. The world was being covered by a visual warning no one could ignore. The most unsettling thing, however, wasn't just the color of the clouds, but the sound that accompanied them. A deep rumble, interspersed with long, low notes, reverberated in the air. It wasn't the typical sound of thunder, but something that resembled an ancient horn being blown. With each note, birds still in the area took flight abruptly, as if pushed by an invisible force. The news quickly reached international channels. Meteorologists tried to explain the phenomenon as volcanic particles refracting sunlight, but they couldn't account for the synchronicity with the low sounds. It was like trying to talk about a musical score by looking only at the notes, without hearing the melody. Meanwhile, thousands of people began gathering near the park. Some came to observe, others to pray. Small groups improvised outdoor services, quoting passages like Revelation 8 and 9, where trumpets announce events affecting the earth, sea, and waters. For these groups, it wasn't a matter of if something greater was coming, but when. And as if to respond, the ground itself bore witness. Around 3 p.m., a light tremor shook the region. It wasn't strong enough to topple objects, but it was noticeable enough for everyone to feel a vibration under their feet. Curiously, the tremor came in 3 short waves, exactly like the trumpet sounds 2 days earlier. Coincidence? Or the echo of a call now coming from below and above, uniting heaven and earth in the same rhythm? Ancient peoples believed that repeated signs were urgent messages from the gods. The Bible, however, reveals that the true God speaks not just to frighten, but to awaken. He desires that all come to repentance, not wanting anyone to perish. And perhaps that's exactly what's happening. Nature, created by Him, serving as a megaphone to call a distracted generation. In the days that followed, similar phenomena began to be reported in other parts of the world. In Iceland, columns of steam rose from newly opened fissures. In Japan, a series of small tremors formed a pattern so regular it seemed like a metronome. In Brazil, coastal fishermen reported hearing a sound from the deep sea, like a distant choir. No matter the distance, the frequency seemed the same. It was as if the entire world were being tuned for the same moment. And that moment doesn't seem far off. Jesus' words in Matthew 24 echo like never before. Watch therefore, for you do not know the day or the hour. It's not about living in fear, but in readiness. Because if the Lord appears in the clouds tonight, there won't be time to fetch oil for the lamp. Human reactions to these signs are revealing. Some mock, others fall silent, and others still begin to put their spiritual lives in order. That's how signs work. They expose what's within. A hardened heart will see them as noise. A sensitive heart will recognize them as the voice of the beloved. And perhaps you're wondering, what should I do if this is truly a sign? The answer is simple, yet profound. Repent. Turn to God. Ask Him to cleanse your heart, to give you discernment to distinguish what is from Him and what isn't. Live as if each day were your last, not in panic, but with purpose. Imagine for a moment that the sound echoing over Yellowstone is the same one that will one day resound across the entire earth, when the heavens open and the Son of Man appears. On that day, there will be no more scientific debates or divided opinions. There will only be two reactions: those who rejoice because they were waiting, and those who tremble because they ignored. Today, there is still time. The door is still open, but it won't remain so forever. The signs aren't sent to entertain, but to warn. Every tremor, every column of light, every mysterious sound is a reminder that history is rapidly moving toward its climax. And that's why this call isn't for the world in general, but for you reading these words. Are you ready? If Jesus comes tonight, will your life reflect someone who was watching, or someone who fell asleep trusting there would be more time? The trumpet has already sounded. The ground has already responded. The heavens have already shone. All that's left is the response of your heart. Declare out loud as an act of faith and vigilance, I am watching. Let this declaration be not just a comment, but a commitment. Share this message with those still spiritually asleep, because when the trumpet sounds again, there may not be time to wake up. What happened in Yellowstone will be recorded as one of the strangest and most inexplicable events of our era. But for those who know the scriptures, it wasn't just strange, it was prophetic. And if you understand the weight of that word, you know that prophecies aren't sent to be collected, but to be obeyed. The countdown has already begun. There's no going back to where we were before. Each day brings us closer to the moment when every eye will see and every tongue will confess. Until then, the signs will continue to multiply. Some will see them as noise, others as music. The question is, which group will you be in? And so while Yellowstone still breathes steam and light, and while mysterious sounds still echo in the mountains, the entire heavens seem to hold their breath. Because the next move may not just be a sign, but the fulfillment itself. The heavens have already spoken, the earth has already trembled, the trumpet has already sounded. And you?